I'm Sarah, 28, and I thought I knew my sister Emma. We shared everything, growing up, clothes, secrets, dreams of our perfect weddings. But when I walked into what was supposed to be my venue tour and saw Emma signing contracts with my wedding planner, using my exact color scheme and booking my dream date, I realized blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. She looked me dead in the eye and called me bitter for being upset. That moment shattered our family forever, but it also awakened something dangerous in me, the need for perfect revenge. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled every single detail of Emma's stolen dream wedding, I need to know, where are you watching from? Have you ever had family betray you like this? Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious family revenge drama, and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when someone underestimates their bitter sister. 3 months earlier, my life was everything I'd dreamed of. I'd been dating Marcus for 4 years, and when he finally proposed on Christmas morning in front of our entire extended family, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. The ring was perfect, a vintage sapphire that belonged to his grandmother, and the proposal was everything romantic I'd ever imagined. Emma, my younger sister by 3 years, screamed louder than anyone when Marcus got down on one knee. She was the first to hug me, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I'm so happy for you, Sarah. You deserve this so much." Her boyfriend Jake stood awkwardly in the corner, clearly uncomfortable with the pressure of the moment, but Emma didn't seem to notice. She was completely focused on my happiness, or so I thought. Within a week of the engagement, I threw myself into wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting their entire life for this moment. I'd been dreaming of my wedding since I was 8 years old, cutting out pictures from bridal magazines and keeping them in a special box under my bed. Now, finally, I could make those dreams reality. The venue was my first priority. Rosewood Manor had been my dream wedding location since high school, when I'd driven past it countless times and imagined saying my vows in their garden pavilion. The property was absolutely magical: rolling hills, century-old oak trees, and a mansion that looked like something from a Jane Austen novel. They only hosted 12 weddings per year, making it incredibly exclusive and expensive, but Marcus and I had been saving specifically for this. I called the moment their booking calendar opened for the following year. October 15th was available, my absolute dream date. Fall foliage, perfect weather, and it happened to be the anniversary of the day Marcus and I first met. Everything felt destined. Emma came with me to the venue tour, and I'll never forget the look in her eyes as we walked through the gardens. She was quieter than usual, asking detailed questions about pricing, availability, and vendor requirements. I thought she was just being supportive, maybe taking mental notes for her own future wedding whenever Jake finally got his act together. "This place is incredible, Sarah," she said, running her fingers along the antique gazebo where I planned to exchange vows. "You're so lucky they had your date available." I spent the next month researching every detail. I found the perfect photographer, someone whose work looked like fine art. I discovered a florist who specialized in the exact aesthetic I wanted: romantic, ethereal, with white roses and eucalyptus. I even found a cake designer whose three-tier masterpieces looked like they belonged in a museum. But here's where I made my crucial mistake. I trusted my sister completely. I shared every vendor's name, every inspiration photo, every detail of my vision. I even gave her access to my wedding Pinterest board because she claimed she wanted to help coordinate surprises for my bachelorette party. "I love how organized you are," Emma would say during our weekly coffee dates, furiously taking notes as I explained my timeline. "You've thought of everything." Meanwhile, Jake's behavior toward Emma was becoming increasingly distant. He'd skip family dinners, avoid wedding talk entirely, and I noticed Emma checking her phone constantly when we were together, her face falling with disappointment when he didn't respond to her texts. "Is everything okay with you and Jake?" I asked during one of our venue planning sessions. "Oh, you know how guys are about wedding stuff," she laughed, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "He'll come around." I should have paid more attention to that conversation. I should have noticed how she lingered whenever I mentioned vendor contracts, or how she asked surprisingly specific questions about payment schedules and cancellation policies. But I was so caught up in my own happiness, so trusting of my sister who'd been my best friend my entire life, that I missed every single red flag. The morning of my venue tour, the final walkthrough before signing contracts, I woke up feeling like the luckiest woman alive. I'd spent hours the night before organizing my planning binder, double-checking every detail, making sure I had all the right questions to ask. I wore my lucky dress, the blue one Emma always said, brought out my eyes, and I couldn't stop smiling as I drove to Rosewood Manor. That's when my perfect world imploded. I walked into the bridal suite expecting to meet with Sarah, my wedding coordinator, to finalize the last details. Instead, I found Emma sitting at the mahogany table, contracts spread in front of her, discussing payment plans with my wedding coordinator. Sarah. Emma looked up with what I can only describe as fake surprise. "What are you doing here?" The coordinator Maria looked confused, glancing between us. "I'm sorry, there seems to be some confusion. I have Emma Sterling down for the October 15th booking consultation." My blood ran cold. Sterling was Emma's last name. She'd kept it even though we'd both gotten married names from our stepfather. But October 15th was my date, my venue, my dream. "There's definitely confusion," I said slowly, my voice barely steady. "I booked this consultation. October 15th is my wedding date." Emma's face didn't show even a flicker of guilt. Instead, she smiled, that same sweet smile she'd given me when she congratulated me on my engagement. "Actually, Sarah, I spoke with Maria yesterday and explained the situation. Jake finally proposed." She held up her left hand, displaying a modest diamond ring I'd never seen before. "And we just fell so in love with everything you showed me about this place. You understand, right? You always said I had such good taste." The room started spinning. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Emma," I whispered, "this is my venue, my date, my wedding coordinator. You can't just, can't." What? Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "Can't book the same vendor, Sarah. You don't own exclusive rights to every pretty place in the state." The conversation that followed will be burned into my memory forever. Emma sat there completely calm, as if she hadn't just stolen every detail of my dream wedding. Maria, the wedding coordinator, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the truth emerged. "I have to ask," Maria said carefully, "Emma, when you contacted me yesterday, you mentioned that your sister had recommended all these specific vendors. You gave me exact names, color schemes, even timeline details. This seems like more than just similar taste." Emma's composure cracked for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Sarah has always been my inspiration. Growing up, I looked up to everything she did. It's natural that we'd have similar preferences." Similar preferences. I could hear my voice rising, but I couldn't control it. "Emma, you have my photographer's name written down. You're describing my exact color palette. You even mentioned the same cake design I showed you last week." "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery," Emma replied with a shrug that made my blood boil. "Besides, you were taking forever to actually book anything. I thought maybe you were having second thoughts." That's when the real gut punch came. Maria pulled out her scheduling book and showed us the timeline. According to her records, Emma had called the day after my original venue tour, asking detailed questions about availability. She'd then called back every week for 3 weeks, slowly gathering information and asking about vendor recommendations. She specifically mentioned that her sister had toured the venue and was considering booking, but that there might be some family financial constraints, Maria explained awkwardly. "She asked if she could secure the date temporarily while you made your decision." I felt sick. Emma had been planning this for weeks, using every detail I'd shared with her, every vendor recommendation, every personal touch I'd spent months researching. And she'd done it all while sitting across from me at coffee shops, pretending to be my supportive sister. "Emma," I said, my voice shaking with rage, "you knew this was my dream venue. You knew October 15th was the anniversary of Marcus and I meeting. You knew I'd been saving for this exact wedding. And now you know that dreams change, she replied coldly. Look, Sarah, I'll be honest with you. Jake and I have been together longer than you and Marcus. We started talking about marriage first. Just because you got engaged first doesn't mean you get dibs on every perfect vendor in the city. This was news to me. Emma and Jake had always seemed casual on and off. I'd never heard them seriously discuss marriage, and frankly, Jake seemed more interested in his video games than his relationship. Besides, Emma continued, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. You've always been a little intense about wedding planning. Maybe you need to step back and think about whether you're marrying Marcus for the right reasons, or if you're just in love with the idea of a perfect wedding. The insult hit like a physical blow. Here was my sister stealing my wedding and then questioning my motives for getting married. How dare you, I whispered. How dare you steal my wedding and then lecture me about my relationship? Emma stood up, gathering her paperwork with infuriating calm. I'm not stealing anything, Sarah. I'm just making better use of opportunities. And honestly, your reaction right now is proving my point. You're being bitter and dramatic over a venue. If your relationship with Marcus is so solid, why does it matter where you get married? The word bitter hung in the air like poison. Maria excused herself clearly, wanting no part of this family drama, leaving Emma and me alone in the bridal suite. Bitter, I repeated. Bitter, Emma, you went behind my back, used information I trusted you with, and stole my wedding. You're calling me bitter for being upset about that. I'm calling you bitter because you can't stand that someone else might have something good happen to them, Emma snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. You've always been the golden child, Sarah. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect boyfriend, who proposes with grandma's ring in front of the whole family. God forbid someone else gets attention for 5 minutes. I stared at my sister, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing the real Emma for the first time in my life. This wasn't sudden jealousy or wedding stress. This was years of resentment I'd never noticed coming out all at once. You think I'm jealous of you? I asked incredulously. I think you're used to being the center of attention and you can't handle that Jake and I are building something beautiful together. Something that doesn't revolve around your approval or your timeline. I wanted to point out that Jake had barely seemed interested in her for months, but something in Emma's desperate tone stopped me. She wasn't just stealing my wedding, she was trying to steal my happiness because she couldn't create her own. Emma, I said quietly, is Jake even okay with this? With booking such an expensive venue, with planning such an elaborate wedding, because from what I've seen, don't she cut me off sharply. Don't you dare question my relationship. Jake is thrilled. He's just not as demonstrative as Marcus, but I could see doubt flickering in her eyes. Whatever was happening between Emma and Jake, it wasn't the solid foundation she was pretending it was. I left Rosewood Manor that day feeling like I'd lost much more than a venue. I'd lost my sister, my trust in family, and my naive belief that blood meant unconditional loyalty. Emma had shown me exactly who she really was, and there was no going back from that revelation. That evening I sat in my apartment with Marcus, telling him everything that had happened. His anger matched mine, but what struck me most was his immediate suggestion. We'll find somewhere even better, he said firmly. We'll plan something so amazing that you'll forget you ever wanted that place. But I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to let Emma's betrayal slide by and pretend everything was fine. I wanted her to understand exactly what she'd done, and more importantly, I wanted her to face the consequences of her choices. That's when I started planning my revenge. The next few days passed in a blur of hurt, anger, and something much more dangerous: calculation. While Emma probably thought she'd won while she was likely celebrating her successful theft of my dream wedding, I was doing something she'd never expect from her bitter older sister. I was planning. Marcus tried to talk me into taking the high road. Babe, I know you're hurt, but let's focus on our own wedding. We'll find somewhere even more beautiful than Rosewood Manor. He meant well, but he didn't understand the depth of Emma's betrayal. This wasn't just about a venue, it was about my sister systematically dismantling my dreams while pretending to support me. I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about everything Emma had done, every conversation we'd had, every detail she'd extracted from me under the guise of sisterly support. And that's when I realized something crucial. Emma hadn't just stolen my venue. She'd stolen my entire wedding vision, right down to the vendors. My photographer, James Morrison, whose artistic style had taken me months to discover. My florist, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in the exact ethereal aesthetic I dreamed of. My cake designer, Antonio Rossi, whose 3-tier masterpieces were booked solid for the next year. My string quartet, Harmony Strings, who only performed at the most exclusive venues. Even my dress designer, Marina Delacroix, whose custom gowns required 6 months of lead time. Emma hadn't just wanted my venue, she'd wanted my entire wedding detail for detail. And in her arrogance, she'd made one critical mistake. She'd assumed that because we shared DNA, I'd just accept her betrayal and move on. I started with reconnaissance. I called James Morrison's studio, pretending to be a potential client interested in his October bookings. "Oh, October 15th, his assistant said cheerfully. "That's the Sterling wedding at Rosewood Manor. Beautiful event, the bride has such a clear vision. Very organized, sent us the most detailed inspiration boards. My inspiration boards, my vision, my organization. I did the same with Rebecca Chen's flower shop. The Sterling wedding. Yes, white roses and eucalyptus, very romantic. The bride specifically mentioned wanting an ethereal garden feel. My exact words from the consultation I'd brought Emma to for inspiration. Every vendor confirmed what I already knew. Emma hadn't just taken my vendors, she'd taken my specific requests, my particular style preferences, even my custom color combinations. She'd essentially ordered my dream wedding in her name. But here's what Emma didn't know about me. I'm not just organized when it comes to wedding planning. I'm organized about everything. And I keep detailed records. Every vendor consultation I'd attended, every contract I'd almost signed, every deposit I'd almost paid, I had documentation. Email chains, saved voicemails, even photos from vendor meetings that Emma had attended with me. I had proof of every original conversation, every initial inquiry I'd made months before Emma's sudden engagement. More importantly, I had something else. Emma didn't expect actual relationships with these vendors. James Morrison remembered me from our 2-hour consultation, where we'd discussed his artistic philosophy. Rebecca Chen remembered my passion for sustainable floriculture. Antonio Rossi remembered my grandmother's cake recipe that I wanted to incorporate. These weren't just business transactions for me. I'd connected with these vendors as an artist connects with collaborators. Emma, on the other hand, had approached them as a bride with a checklist, looking for people to execute someone else's vision. I started making phone calls, but not to steal the vendors back. That would have been small thinking. Instead, I started asking very specific questions about contract details, payment schedules, and cancellation policies. "James, I'm actually calling about my sister's wedding, Emma Sterling. I wanted to surprise her with something special, but I need to understand the timeline for her contract." Professional that he was, James couldn't share specific financial details, but he could confirm that Emma had put down 20% deposits across all the major vendors, with remaining balances due 30 days before the wedding date. Standard industry practice. Emma had clearly invested significant money she and Jake didn't really have based on their rental apartment and his entry-level marketing job. She was banking on this wedding happening, probably using credit cards or loans to fund her stolen dream. That's when I called my mother. Mom had been staying out of the venue conflict, as she diplomatically called it. She'd raised Emma and me to work out our own problems, and she was clearly hoping this would blow over like our childhood squabbles. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Oh, Sarah, please don't drag me into this wedding drama." "You girls need to." "Mom," I interrupted, "did Emma really get engaged, or is she planning a wedding to force Jake to propose?" The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Sarah, that's not for me to mom. Please." She sighed deeply. "Emma called me in tears 2 weeks ago. Jake had been talking about taking a break, said he wasn't ready for the next level of commitment. She was convinced that if she could show him how perfect their life could be together, if she could plan something beautiful. My stomach dropped. Emma wasn't planning a wedding, she was planning an elaborate fantasy to trap a man who was trying to break up with her. She used her savings and took out a credit card cash advance, Mom continued quietly. She's convinced that once Jake sees everything planned, once he understands how serious she is, he'll realize he wants to marry her. This was so much worse than I'd thought. Emma hadn't just stolen my wedding out of jealousy, she'd stolen it out of desperation, using my vendors and my vision to build a house of cards designed to manipulate a man who was already pulling away from her. Has she actually shown Jake any of the contracts? I asked. I don't think so. She says she wants it to be a surprise, but Sarah, I think she's scared he'll try to stop her if he knows how much money she's spending. After I hung up with Mom, I sat in my car for 20 minutes processing this information. Emma wasn't just betraying me, she was destroying herself financially for a fantasy wedding with a man who didn't want to marry her, and she was using my stolen dream as the foundation for her delusion. But you know what? I realized I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. Emma had made her choices. She'd chosen to betray family, chosen to steal my vendors, chosen to call me bitter for being upset about it, and chosen to build her entire future on a foundation of lies and manipulation. She'd declared war on me while pretending it was sisterly competition. She'd used my love and trust against me. And now she was going to learn that underestimating someone doesn't make them harmless, it makes them dangerous. I started the car and drove home to Marcus, my mind already working through the details of what needed to happen next. Emma thought she'd won by stealing my wedding, but she'd actually given me something much more powerful, the moral clarity to destroy hers completely. The war was about to begin, and my sweet little sister had no idea what was coming. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt since the day of Emma's betrayal. While she was probably busy planning her wedding with my stolen vendors, I was about to become her worst nightmare. But I needed to be smart about this. Revenge served cold isn't just more satisfying, it's more effective. First, I needed to understand exactly what Emma had committed to financially. I spent the morning calling every vendor not as Sarah the betrayed sister but as Sarah the wedding industry professional. You see, Emma didn't know that my day job in event marketing had given me connections throughout the wedding industry. I'd worked with many of these vendors on corporate events, and they knew me as more than just a potential bride. James, this is Sarah Chen from Prestige Events, I said using my professional contact. I'm coordinating a vendor timeline for multiple October events. Can you confirm your sterling wedding requirements? Professional courtesy meant James could share general timeline information. What I learned made my blood run cold and my revenge plans crystallize perfectly. Emma had booked everything for a 150-person wedding. The photographer package alone was $8,000. The floral arrangements I'd designed were priced at $6,500. The cake design was $3,200. The string quartet was $2,800. She'd even booked my makeup artist and hairstylist another $1,500 combined, including the venue fee. Emma had committed to over $35 0 wedding expenses. For a girl who worked part-time at a boutique and whose boyfriend was an entry-level marketing assistant, this was financial suicide. But here's what made it perfect for my purposes: wedding vendor contracts are ironclad. The industry runs on deposits and strict cancellation policies because vendors block out dates and turn away other business. Emma's 20% deposits totaled over $7,000, and the contracts I knew she'd signed because I'd reviewed the same ones had brutal cancellation terms. More than 60 days out, forfeit your deposit. Less than 60 days out, forfeit your deposit plus 50% of the remaining balance. Less than 30 days out, you owe the full amount whether the event happens or not. Emma had essentially signed contracts that would bankrupt her if the wedding didn't happen, but she'd done it for a man who was already trying to break up with her. I called Rebecca Chen, my florist, directly. Rebecca, it's Sarah. I know this is awkward, but I need to ask you about the Sterling wedding. Oh, Sarah, Rebecca's voice was uncomfortable. I had no idea when Emma contacted me that she was your sister or that you'd already done a consultation for the same date. If I'd known, it's not your fault, I assured her. But I need to know, has Jake, Emma's fiancé, been involved in any of the planning discussions? That's just it, Rebecca said quietly. I've done hundreds of weddings and I've never had a bride plan everything alone like this. Emma says Jake is letting her handle all the details, but Sarah. Most grooms are at least involved in budget discussions for weddings this expensive. My suspicions were confirmed. Jake had no idea Emma was planning a $35,000 wedding in his name. That afternoon, I did something that felt both terrible and necessary. I reached out to Jake directly. Jake, it's Sarah. Can we meet for coffee? I think we need to talk about Emma. Jake looked terrible when he showed up at the coffee shop near his office. Dark circles under his eyes, constantly checking his phone, the demeanor of a man trapped in a situation he didn't understand. Sarah, if this is about the venue thing, I really don't want to get in the middle of Jake, I interrupted gently. What do you know about your wedding plans? He looked confused. What do you mean? Emma mentioned she wanted to start looking at places, but we haven't really discussed details yet. To be honest, I've been trying to talk to her about slowing down. I'm not sure I'm ready for marriage, and I think Emma and I need to work through some fundamental compatibility issues first. My heart actually broke for him. Jake had no idea that Emma had spent thousands of dollars planning a wedding he didn't want, using vendors and visions stolen from me. Jake, Emma has booked vendors for a wedding on October 15th. She's put down significant deposits, and she's signed contracts that commit you both to over $35,000 in expenses. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. Emma doesn't have that kind of money, and she knows I'm barely covering my student loans. I pulled out copies of the vendor contracts I'd managed to obtain through my industry connections. Jake stared at them in horror, seeing his name listed as co-responsible party for debts he'd never agreed to. She's planning to surprise you with everything already arranged, I explained. The venue, photographers, flowers, everything. She thinks if she presents you with a perfect wedding plan, you'll be so impressed that you'll want to go through with it. Jake put his head in his hands. This explains so much. She's been acting strange for weeks, talking about our future, constantly asking weird questions about my family guest list. Sarah, I've been trying to figure out how to tell her I think we should take a break. That's when I made my decision. I could have walked away and let Emma's delusion collapse naturally when Jake inevitably broke up with her. But that would have taken months, during which she'd continue using my stolen wedding plans, possibly even posting photos on social media of her venue and her vendors. The humiliation of seeing my dream wedding attributed to my sister's desperate fantasy was unacceptable. Emma had chosen to steal my happiness to build her house of lies. Now I was going to burn that house down. Jake, I need you to do something, and I need you to trust me. Emma has to learn that actions have consequences, and right now, the only thing stopping her from destroying her financial future is the truth. I explained my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its precision. Jake would confront Emma about the wedding contracts, demand to see all the vendor agreements, and when she inevitably tried to manipulate him into going along with her plans, he would do what he'd already been planning to do: break up with her. But the timing would be crucial. The cancellation policies meant Emma had until exactly 60 days before the wedding date to cancel vendors and recover some of her deposits. After that, she'd be financially ruined regardless of whether the wedding happened. I can't be responsible for Emma losing all that money, Jake said uncertainly. Jake, she stole that money from me first. Those vendors, that venue, that entire wedding vision. I spent months planning every detail. Emma used information I trusted her with to book my exact wedding for herself. She's been planning to manipulate you into marriage, using my stolen dreams as bait. I showed him the documentation I'd kept, emails, photos from vendor meetings Emma had attended with me, even the Pinterest board she'd accessed to copy my vision perfectly. This isn't just about money, I continued. It's about Emma learning that she can't steal other people's lives and expect no consequences. Help me teach her that lesson, And I promise you'll be free of this situation with your integrity intact. Jake looked at the evidence, then at me, then back at the wedding contracts with his forged signature. What exactly do you need me to do? The beauty of my revenge plan was its simplicity. I wasn't going to sabotage Emma directly. I was going to let the truth destroy her stolen dreams while I controlled the timing perfectly. Jake and I scheduled the conversation for exactly 61 days before October 15th. This timing was crucial. Emma would have exactly 24 hours to cancel vendors and recover her deposits before the brutal cancellation penalties kicked in. It was a narrow window that required precise execution, but it would save her from complete financial ruin while still destroying her stolen wedding. I spent the intervening week gathering every piece of evidence I needed. Screenshots of my original Pinterest boards with timestamps, email chains with vendors from before Emma's engagement, photos of Emma and me at vendor consultations where I'd discussed my specific vision, text messages where Emma had asked me innocent questions about wedding planning details, but the most damning evidence was something Emma didn't know I had a recording. During one of our coffee planning sessions when Emma had been asking particularly detailed questions about vendor contracts and pricing, I'd accidentally left my phone's voice memo app running. The 20-minute recording captured Emma asking about specific cancellation policies, deposit requirements, and whether vendors ever shared client information between family members. At the time, I'd thought she was just being thorough in her wedding planning support. Now I could hear the calculated extraction of information in every question. The day of Jake's confrontation, I positioned myself strategically. Emma had invited me to lunch, probably to gloat about her wedding progress or perhaps to gauge whether I'd given up my fight for the vendors. I suggested we meet at a restaurant directly across from the coffee shop where Jake planned to have his breakup conversation with Emma. "You seem different," Emma said as we sat down. "More relaxed. Have you finally accepted that the best woman won?" The smugness in her voice almost made me abandon my careful plans in favor of throwing my water in her face. But I'd come too far to let emotion derail my strategy now. "I've been thinking about what you said," I replied carefully. "About being bitter. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was too attached to specific vendors instead of focusing on what really matters, marrying Marcus." Emma's face lit up with triumph. "I'm so glad you're seeing it that way, and honestly, Sarah, I think Jake and I are going to throw such a beautiful wedding that it'll inspire you to think outside the box for your own plans." "Tell me about Jake's involvement in the planning," I said casually. "He must be so excited about everything you've arranged." For just a moment, Emma's confident facade flickered. "Well, you know how men are about wedding details. Jake trusts me to handle everything. He's just happy to let me create something magical for us." That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. At coffee shop, about to show her the contracts. I excused myself to the bathroom and called Marcus. "It's happening now. Are you recording this call like we discussed?" "Recording started," Marcus confirmed. He was my backup plan, a witness to the timeline who could verify that I wasn't present when Jake confronted Emma, just in case anyone questioned my involvement later. When I returned to the table, Emma was checking her phone frantically. "Jake wants to meet for coffee right now. He says we need to discuss something important about our future." "That sounds romantic," I said innocently. "Maybe he has a surprise for you." Emma practically glowed as she gathered her things. "I bet he's finally ready to start talking about honeymoon plans. I've been waiting for him to show more initiative in the wedding planning." I watched through the restaurant window as Emma walked across the street to meet her fate. Part of me, a small part, felt guilty about what was about to happen. But then I remembered her calling me bitter while stealing my dream wedding, and the guilt evaporated. My phone started buzzing with texts from Jake giving me real-time updates, showed her the contracts. "She's claiming she only put down small deposits. She's trying to convince me the wedding is mostly planned with gift money from her parents." I told her I spoke to her parents yesterday. "They know nothing about wedding planning or gift money." She's crying, saying she did this for us. I'm breaking up with her now. She's screaming that I'm ruining her life. She's claiming she can't cancel the vendors because she'll lose her deposits. I told her she has exactly 24 hours to cancel before penalties kick in. She's asking how I know so much about the vendor contracts. I told her I had help from someone who actually read them. That last text made me smile. Emma was about to realize that her bitter sister had been 10 steps ahead of her the entire time. 20 minutes later, Emma burst back into the restaurant. Her face was blotchy from crying, her careful makeup completely ruined. She collapsed into her chair and stared at me with a look I'd never seen before, equal parts devastation and dawning comprehension. "You," she whispered. "You did this." Did what I asked calmly, though. My heart was pounding with adrenaline. Jake knew things. About the contracts, about the cancellation policies, about the vendor deposits. Things I never told him. The only person I discussed those details with was you. I took a sip of my water and met her eyes steadily. "Emma, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't spoken to Jake about your wedding planning. It was technically true I'd spoken to him about her wedding fraud, which was entirely different." "You turned him against me," Emma said, her voice rising. Other restaurant patrons were starting to stare. "You couldn't stand that I found happiness, so you sabotaged my relationship." "Emma," I said quietly, "I didn't sabotage anything. I simply made sure Jake knew the truth about what you were planning in his name." "The fact that the truth destroyed your relationship tells you everything you need to know about how healthy that relationship actually was." Emma stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment she realized the scope of what had just happened. She wasn't just losing Jake, she was losing the wedding, the money, and any remaining pretense that her actions had been justified. "You're going to pay for this," she whispered. "No, Emma," I replied calmly. "You're going to pay for this. You have approximately 23 hours to cancel your vendor contracts before you owe the full balances, regardless of whether your wedding happens. I'd suggest you start making phone calls." I left money on the table for my untouched lunch and walked out, leaving Emma sitting alone with the consequences of her choices. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in watching karma work its magic. Emma spent her last day before the vendor penalty deadlines, making the most humiliating phone calls of her life, canceling every single aspect of the wedding she'd stolen from me. I know this because the vendors called me. "Sarah, this is James Morrison. I wanted to let you know that Emma Sterling canceled her October 15th booking today. She seemed quite distressed and mentioned that you might be interested in rebooking the date." One by one, every vendor Emma had stolen contacted me with the same news. Rebecca Chen called about the flowers. Antonio Rossi called about the cake. Even Maria from Rosewood Manor reached out to confirm that October 15th was available again. But here's the beautiful part, I didn't want them anymore. In the weeks since Emma's betrayal, Marcus and I had started exploring completely different wedding options. We'd discovered a charming vineyard that felt more authentically us than the formal elegance of Rosewood Manor. We'd found vendors who excited us with fresh ideas rather than executing a vision I'd been holding on to since high school. Emma's theft had actually freed me from a wedding fantasy that was more about Pinterest perfection than personal meaning. So when each vendor called, I politely thanked them and declined to rebook. Actually, I told James Morrison, I think Emma and I have very similar aesthetic preferences. If she decides to plan another wedding in the future, I highly recommend working with her. She has excellent taste. The irony was delicious. Emma had stolen my exact wedding vision, and now that vision was permanently tainted for me. She'd destroyed her own dreams and liberated me from mine in the same fell swoop. But Emma wasn't done making things worse for herself. 3 days after the vendor cancellations, I received a Facebook message that made me laugh out loud. "Sarah, I hope you're proud of yourself. You've destroyed my relationship and humiliated me in front of everyone I've ever worked with. Jake is telling people I'm financially irresponsible and manipulative. My coworkers know I took cash advances for a wedding that didn't happen. Mom is disappointed in both of us, but especially you for being so vindictive. I hope the revenge was worth destroying our family. I screenshot the message and sent it to Marcus with the caption, "Still thinks she's the victim." But Emma's public humiliation was just beginning. Because when you steal someone's wedding plans and then have to cancel everything publicly, people ask questions. And Emma, in her desperation to save face, started telling anyone who would listen that I'd sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy. This is where Emma made her final fatal mistake. She decided to make our private family drama public. She posted a long Facebook rant about toxic family members who can't stand to see others succeed, and bitter siblings who sabotage relationships. She painted herself as the victim of my jealousy, claiming I'd manipulated Jake into breaking up with her because I couldn't handle her finding happiness first. Emma's post got a lot of sympathetic comments from people who only knew her version of events. But it also caught the attention of some mutual friends who knew the real timeline, including my college roommate Jessica, who had been my maid of honor when I first got engaged. Jessica's comment was a thing of beauty. "Emma, I'm confused by this post. Sarah got engaged in December and has been planning her October 15th wedding for months. I have screenshots of her vendor consultations from January. Are you saying you independently chose the exact same date, venue, and vendors as your sister? That seems like quite a coincidence." Other friends started chiming in with similar observations. People who had seen my engagement posts, my venue photos, my vendor research. Emma's narrative began crumbling in real time as people realized she'd been lying about the timeline. The final blow came when my cousin Rachel posted, "Wait, didn't Emma ask me for Sarah's wedding Pinterest login last month because she wanted to help coordinate the bachelorette party, and now she's claiming Sarah copied her ideas?" Emma deleted the post within hours, but not before multiple people had screenshot it. The internet is forever, and Emma's public lie was now preserved for anyone who cared to look. But the most satisfying moment came 2 weeks later when Emma called me crying. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know what I did was wrong. I was desperate and scared that Jake was pulling away, and I thought if I could show him this perfect future we could have together. I never meant for things to go this far." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Emma sounded like my actual sister again, vulnerable, regretful, and genuinely sorry. "I lost Jake, I lost my savings, I damaged my credit, and now everyone knows what I did. I have to live with this humiliation for years. Please, can we try to fix our relationship? I miss my sister." I took a deep breath before answering. "Emma, I accept your apology. But understanding why you did something doesn't undo the harm it caused. You didn't just steal my wedding plans, you showed me that you're willing to betray family when it benefits you. That's not something I can just forget." "So what does this mean for us?" she asked quietly. "It means we're sisters who will be polite at family gatherings, but we're no longer friends who share our secrets and dreams. You broke that trust. And actions have consequences that apologies can't erase." Emma cried harder, but she didn't argue. I think she finally understood the real cost of her choices. 6 months later, Marcus and I had our perfect wedding at the vineyard, surrounded by people who had genuinely supported our relationship. Emma attended with our parents, and she was polite and appropriate throughout the event. But we both knew something fundamental had changed between us forever. Looking back, I'm almost grateful Emma stole my wedding. Her betrayal revealed who she really was under pressure, taught me the value of authentic relationships over family obligation, and freed me from trying to recreate a Pinterest-perfect fantasy instead of building something real. So, here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that completely changed your relationship dynamic? How did you handle it when someone you trusted used your love against you? Drop your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experiences help other people feel less alone in their family drama. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family revenge stories. Share this with anyone who's ever had a family member betray their trust. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Family love should never come with the price of accepting betrayal, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Here's to authentic relationships, honest communication, and the sweet justice that comes when karma finally catches up with those who take advantage of the people who love them most.